The story opens with a family enjoying a peaceful moment together, completely unaware that their lives would be irrevocably changed within minutes. Jason and Beth were engaged in quiet conversation when piercing screams from outside shattered the tranquility. Rushing from their house, they discovered absolute chaos engulfing their neighborhood. Panicked residents fled their homes as if facing an imminent catastrophe, their faces etched with terror as they hastily evacuated. When Jason approached a neighbor to understand the cause of the panic, the man was too frantic to provide coherent answers, frantically packing belongings while preparing to escape. However, Jason noticed the neighbor's young son gathering his possessions and questioned the boy about their destination. The child revealed that his father's friend, who worked for the government, had issued a warning about a deadly virus spreading throughout the area, one capable of transforming ordinary people into monstrous beings.
Why do you have to leave?
The government man, he said the virus, it changes people bad.
Before the boy could elaborate further, his mother appeared and urgently pulled him away. When Jason called after her, demanding to know more about this virus, she turned briefly to deliver a chilling warning. There was no time for explanations, and Jason must immediately take his wife and daughter as far from the city as possible. Overwhelmed by terror, Jason and Beth wasted no time gathering their family and fleeing the city by car. However, during their escape, they witnessed something deeply unsettling. The same neighbors who had been desperately fleeing were now inexplicably returning to their homes.
Where are those people headed back?
I don't know.
This bizarre reversal only intensified Jason and Beth's confusion and fear. As they continued their journey, the family became trapped in dense traffic. When they exited their vehicle to investigate the cause of the delay, they discovered that police had established a complete blockade at the city's only exit, while helicopters circled ominously overhead like aerial sentinels. Through loudspeakers, officials announced that a dangerous virus had contaminated the entire city and ordered all residents to return to their homes immediately. Jason's suspicions deepened. If the virus had already spread throughout the city, why were authorities forcing people to remain instead of facilitating their escape? Suddenly, a massive boulder crashed down from the nearby mountain, completely destroying their car. The family recoiled in horror as violent tremors shook the ground beneath their feet. Two military fighter jets emerged from behind the mountain and advanced toward the city, unleashing a devastating bombardment that reduced the entire metropolis to ash and rubble. In that moment, Beth realized with crystal clarity that had they obeyed the police orders and returned home, their fate would have been sealed in the most terrible way imaginable. The fighter jets then redirected their deadly focus toward the stranded civilians on the road, and the horrifying truth became unmistakable. The government intended to eliminate every last person in the area. Panic erupted as people scattered in all directions, desperately seeking shelter from the aerial assault. But Jason and Beth understood the futility of random flight against military aircraft. Scanning their surroundings frantically, Beth spotted a school perched on the mountainside and recognized it as their only viable refuge. Without hesitation, Jason led Beth and their daughter Zoe up the treacherous mountain slope toward the building.
Shelter out back! I don't know if it's safe.
It's safer than
As the fighter jets began their merciless bombardment of the civilians trapped on the bridge below. Racing against time, the family reached the school and discovered a hidden tunnel entrance just as the aircraft closed in on their position. They plunged into the underground passage mere seconds before a thunderous explosion shook the earth above, sealing the bunker door behind them as debris and flames consumed the surface. Safe but shaken in their subterranean sanctuary, the family grappled with the incomprehensible reality of their situation. What kind of virus could possibly justify the government's decision to annihilate an entire city's population? The questions multiplied with no answers forthcoming, leaving them with only one certainty. Survival depended on remaining hidden in this underground refuge. However, their temporary safety brought new concerns. How long could they realistically remain in this confined space, and what would sustain them once their resources dwindled? Fortunately, the bunker contained substantial quantities of preserved food supplies that could sustain 3 people for an extended period.
Look at all this.
Though the uncertainty of their long-term prospects weighed heavily on their minds, Beth found herself consumed with worry about her daughter Zoe's well-being in these harsh conditions, and her anxiety intensified when she discovered a deep bleeding wound on her hand, an injury sustained while frantically closing the bunker door during their escape. Adding to their mounting fears was the terrifying possibility that the deadly virus might have already infiltrated their bodies, though immediate survival took precedence over such concerns. Jason secured secured the bunker entrance with heavy iron chains, ensuring no external force could breach their sanctuary, and the family resigned themselves to an indefinite underground existence. Life beneath the surface proved brutally monotonous, consuming the same preserved rations daily, drinking murky water, and passing endless hours playing cards to maintain their sanity. Cut off completely from the outside world, the psychological toll of their confinement grew increasingly unbearable as days stretched into weeks. The claustrophobic environment began wearing down their spirits, transforming their refuge into a prison. Yet, venturing above ground remained unthinkable. Certain death awaited any who emerged too soon. This existence felt apocalyptic, prompting Zoe to repeatedly ask her father when they could return to the surface. Questions that Jason could only answer with hollow reassurances about waiting until the virus subsided. To comfort his daughter, Jason would place his hands over her eyes and encourage her to imagine the world they once knew. But these gentle diversions provided only temporary relief.
Look there, Sylvia. Standing behind the counter, and she's wearing that silly cone-shaped apron.
Months passed unnoticed in their timeless underground world until they realized over 300 days had elapsed since their desperate flight from the surface. Through a makeshift periscope Beth had constructed, Zoe glimpsed the devastated landscape above, a charred wasteland devoid of any signs of human life. The sight convinced the young girl that they might be among the world's last survivors, though her mother quickly dismissed such dark thoughts, suggesting other families might be hiding in similar refuges. Their already precarious situation deteriorated when their food supplies began mysteriously disappearing. After Zoe opened what should have been a full can, only to find it completely empty with a small hole gnawed through its base, Beth discovered that all 12 remaining cans had been similarly compromised, representing 2 weeks' worth of rations. Examining the ventilation system, Beth concluded that rats had infiltrated their sanctuary and were systematically destroying their survival provisions. The urgency of eliminating these pests became paramount. Their very existence depended on protecting what little food remained. When Jason attempted to reassure his distraught daughter by promising to venture above ground for additional supplies if necessary, the gravity of their situation became even more apparent. The next day, as Zoe played with her mother, they caught the culprit in the act, a rat brazenly stealing their food in broad daylight. Jason armed himself with a knife, determined to eliminate the threat.
Who took care of that thing?
But the agile rodent proved elusive, dodging his attacks while knocking over their precious lantern in the process. Beth managed to kill the rat with a swift blow, but their momentary victory was overshadowed by immediate disaster. The fallen lantern's intense heat burned Jason's hand as he attempted to right it, and when the glass shattered, flames engulfed their wooden table. The extinguished fire left behind a more insidious threat, thick smoke that filled their entire bunker and began seeping upward through the ventilation system, creating a visible beacon that could expose their hidden sanctuary to whatever dangers lurked on the surface. Terror gripped the family as they realized the smoke would inevitably reveal their location. Jason desperately hoped the cover of darkness might conceal the telltale smoke plume, but his optimism provided little comfort as the 3 survivors spent a sleepless night paralyzed by fear. When morning arrived, their worst suspicions were confirmed. The periscope revealed a thick cloud of smoke hovering above their position, making their presence unmistakably obvious to any observer. Beth astutely recognized that the rising smoke would have deposited ash residue around their entrance, creating physical evidence that could lead searchers directly to their bunker door. Despite the enormous risk, she and Jason concluded they had no choice but to venture outside and eliminate these incriminating traces before discovery became inevitable. Before departing, Jason extracted a solemn promise from young Zoe that regardless of what she might hear or witness from above, she must remain safely hidden within the bunker until their return.
So no matter what happens up there, no matter what you hear, do not open the door.
After ensuring no immediate threats were present outside, the parents cautiously emerged to begin the dangerous task of concealing their refuge. Left alone in the claustrophobic underground space, Zoe anxiously awaited her parents' return. But when they failed to reappear after what felt like an eternity, she climbed onto a makeshift observation platform to monitor their progress through the periscope. Initially relieved to spot her parents working to camouflage the bunker entrance, her comfort quickly transformed into absolute terror when she observed a dark, menacing figure moving steadily toward them through the distant forest. Despite her frantic attempts to warn her parents by shouting, the considerable distance rendered her cries inaudible, and in her desperation to protect them, Zoe abandoned her promise and rushed to the surface. However, upon emerging, she discovered her parents had vanished without a trace, prompting her to call out anxiously until someone suddenly grasped her face from behind. The mysterious figure proved to be her mother, who had been hiding nearby, and moments later, a stampeding herd of wild deer thundered past their position. Though the family had avoided immediate danger, the deer's panicked flight clearly indicated they were fleeing from something far more threatening, intensifying the survivors' sense of impending doom. Recognizing the escalating danger, the family retreated swiftly into their bunker, where Jason secured the entrance with wooden reinforcements and iron chains before ordering absolute silence from his companions. Almost immediately, they detected the ominous sound of footsteps circling overhead, as if something was methodically searching for their exact location. The mysterious entity prowled around their hiding place for what seemed like hours, while the terrified family pressed themselves against the far wall of bunker, hoping to remain undetected even if their sanctuary was breached. When Zoe began to whimper in fear, her parents immediately silenced her, understanding that any sound could spell their doom.
You can go anywhere you want, anywhere in the world, anytime.
Their desperate attempt at concealment was sabotaged when Zoe's beloved doll became entangled on a loose screw, and despite Jason's frantic efforts to prevent the inevitable, the toy's voice mechanism activated, producing sounds that instantly revealed their presence to the creature above. Jason immediately destroyed the doll's speaker, but the damage was irreversible. Thunderous banging erupted from above as heavy footsteps positioned themselves directly over the bunker entrance. Their hunter had found them and began a relentless assault on their final barrier, applying such tremendous force that even the reinforced chains began snapping under the supernatural strength of whatever sought to reach them. Beth demonstrated remarkable courage by climbing toward the entrance to help reinforce the chains securing their door. But despite their combined efforts, the heavy iron barrier began slowly yielding to the supernatural force pressing against it. Through the widening gap, a terrifying black silhouette became visible, its eyes glowing like luminous orbs. Death itself seemed to be peering down at them from above. Without hesitation, Jason struck the creature with his improvised weapon, sending it reeling backward long enough for him to wedge the pipe against the door and force it shut. The entity retreated temporarily, but Jason's entire body trembled uncontrollably as the horrifying reality became clear. The outside world harbored not only merciless soldiers, but also demonic creatures beyond human comprehension. The family huddled together near the stairway in complete despair, knowing their sanctuary had been compromised and that this initial encounter was merely a reconnaissance mission. They understood with chilling certainty that the creature would return with reinforcements, and when that happened, their makeshift defenses would prove utterly inadequate. Their worst fears materialized when the bunker began vibrating ominously, followed by the thunderous sound of countless entities racing across the surface above them. The creatures had indeed summoned their brethren, and now a veritable army of demons congregated around the bunker entrance, while the terrified family cowered below. The coordinated assault that followed dwarfed the previous attack in both ferocity and power. The reinforced iron door shattered completely under the tremendous force, revealing multiple pairs of glowing eyes staring hungrily into their refuge. The family retreated deeper into the bunker as the creatures began their relentless pursuit. In a desperate bid to create a barrier, Beth hurled her oil lamp between them and the advancing horde, igniting a wall of flames while she and Jason barricaded the passage with whatever furniture they could move. Though they knew this temporary obstacle would not deter their supernatural pursuers for long, it provided precious moments to seek an alternative escape route. Zoe spotted their salvation, a ventilation shaft leading toward the surface, and Jason immediately began tearing away the metal grating with desperate strength. He managed to push his wife and daughter into the narrow passage just as the demons breached their improvised barricade. But when Jason attempted to follow, his larger frame became wedged in the confined space. With the creatures closing in rapidly, Jason made an agonizing decision and deliberately dislocated his shoulder to compress his body enough to fit through the opening. His screams of pain echoed through the ventilation system as Beth desperately pulled him toward freedom. But just as escape seemed possible, a massive clawed appendage seized Jason's leg and began dragging him back into the bunker. Recognizing the futility of resistance, Jason turned to his wife with final words of love and protection for their daughter before the demon pulled him into the darkness below.
Remember our promise. So it comes from.
Rather than surrender to terror, Jason's final act was one of defiance, challenging his captor to face him in combat while his anguished screams provided covering noise for his family's continued escape. Witnessing her parents' brutal fate pushed young Zoe beyond her breaking point. In one explosive moment of rage, she attacked a remaining soldier with superhuman speed and strength, shattering his protective mask. Only Beth's dying intervention prevented her daughter from completing the kill, as the mother's final act was protecting Zoe from becoming consumed by the same monstrous transformation. Beth's calming influence gradually restored Zoe's humanity.
Remember rule number 2, Zozo! Remember rule number 2, you can stop it!
The dark veins fading from her skin as she regained control over her emotions. The unmasked soldier, however, faced a different fate. His compromised protection left him vulnerable to viral infection, beginning his own inevitable transformation. Jason's final moments were spent looking upon his daughter's face one last time, placing his fingers gently over her eyes in their familiar gesture of comfort before death claimed him forever. As another military helicopter approached, Beth gathered her remaining strength and fled with Zoe through the devastated cityscape. Their desperate flight led them through collapsed buildings and debris fields until they discovered a tunnel entrance. Following a beam of light deeper into the underground passage, they encountered the same neighborhood boy they had met at the story's beginning, the government worker's son who had first warned them about the viral outbreak. The boy guided them to a vast subterranean network where his parents and dozens of other infected survivors had created a hidden community. These people had learned a crucial truth that the military refused to acknowledge. While the virus was indeed dangerous, it was not inherently lethal. The infection only manifested its monstrous effects when victims experienced extreme fear or uncontrolled anger. Those who had mastered emotional regulation could live relatively normal lives despite carrying the virus. The survivors had initially believed the soldiers were demonic entities, but the ultimate irony was that they themselves had become the demons in the eyes of their own government. In this underground sanctuary, the infected had found a way to survive as outcasts from the world above, forced to exist like refugees in the shadows while learning to control the darkness that lived within them. Their story was not one of monsters and heroes, but of ordinary people caught between a government's fear and a virus that challenged the very definition of humanity itself. With this story ends. If you liked the video, please subscribe to our channel